Welcome in to Duval Daily, your daily dose of Jacksonville Jaguars news and analysis. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks for tuning in. As you can see today, we have a special guest, the first guest on Duval Daily here, NFL draft analyst, dare I say, expert, Ian Cummings of Pro Football Network. Make sure to go gas him up on Twitter, Ian_Cummings_9. I believe I got that correct. Ian, how are we doing today?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I gotta change that Twitter, handle. Everyone tells me it's too long, too many
Too
underscores.
many
So
underscores.
I'll try and find something a little more linear in the next cycle. But for now, Ian_Cummings_9. I'm doing great. It's been a busy cycle for sure. I'm excited to kind of ramp up into the draft. And I was telling Jordan, before the stream, like a little excited to wind down afterwards as well. But we've still got work to do. Still got prospects to analyze and talk about. So we're in the home stretch though. We're getting there.
Absolutely. And you just dropped a 7 round mock draft yesterday, a full 7 round mock draft for the entire NFL. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I've been doing one every month, and it gets a little repetitive, but it's always interesting to play with different, outcomes, possibilities. That's kind of the what the exercise of a mock draft is all about, just kind of running through the different probabilities and seeing what might happen. So it's always good, especially for rounds 3 and then 4 through 7. There's
Yeah.
so many different possibilities, and I love running through those and seeing what kind of gems, diamonds in the rough teams can get.
Yeah. Well, you definitely have the Jaguars with some interesting ones, round 3 and on. Obviously, more fans are going to be intrigued by what happens prior to round 3. That's just the nature of how this thing goes. But we'll jump into your mock draft, just kind of what you see the Jaguars doing and kind of frame our conversations that way. And it might get monotonous for you doing all those 7 rounds over and over again every month, but I'm sure the fans really appreciate seeing different scenarios.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for sure, but I do it with it's interesting too because at different points of the year, like your what's the word? Your objective changes, like early on, like in August and September and October, there's still so much football left to be played that you can kind of experiment with different possibilities a little bit more because nothing is set in stone. Whereas this mock draft, now I'm looking at who teams are visiting with, I'm looking at what the rumors are saying, and you kind of just base it off of that, a little more predictive in that sense. So your methodology changes as the cycle goes on, and that's another thing that I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, now it's all about nailing it, getting it right,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I'm probably gonna miss a lot, but it's fun anyway. So
Everyone does.
exactly.
And if you're a mock drafter or if you're an NFL scout or an NFL draft analyst, you haven't been doing it if you're not missing.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's the best part. Missing helps you learn. Year in and year
Mhm.
out. So it's something that you kind of take in stride and you just apply it next year.
Absolutely. Love it. So you can follow myself at Jordan DeLugo on Twitter, Generation Jaguar at Generation Jag. And of course, if you enjoy the content, please go ahead and like and subscribe on YouTube. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Ian Cummings of PFN, you have your 7 round mock draft that we're going to dive into. Trayvon Walker going first overall to the Jaguars. You can check out the entire mock draft on PFN. Uh, so just talk to me about Trayvon Walker and what's up with the number 1 pick right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough because I look at, both of these edge rushers. It seems like the conversation has been dictated by Walker and Aiden Hutchinson of Michigan. Those are kind of the two that are most often associated with that number 1 pick. We do know that they could use an offensive tackle on the other side too. Obviously, Walker Little and Juwan Taylor may be battling for that spot. Cam Robinson on the left side. Maybe they're going to extend him. We'll see. But, so I look at Evan Neal as another potential one that I would like there. File him at right tackle, and I think he's the one that's most worth that pick between those three. But right now, the conversation looks like it's kind of steering towards either Trayvon Walker or Aiden Hutchinson. So with those two players, if you're putting them side by side, the question you got to ask is, which one would you take if you had to pick one of those two? If I'm, especially right now, as we said, these mocks are a little more predictive. So if it looks like it's kind of being bucketed towards those guys, who am I going to pick, if I had to choose one of those? So I look at both of them. I think they both have limitations and different perspectives. I do like Hutchinson's floor. I do think he's a very violent rusher. Very high motor. He's got violent hands, and he's shown that he can set up tackles and kind of win by he's got that speed to power. He's got counters in his arsenal. But at the same time, he's a little bit on the shorter side with his arms. Under 33 inches. I feel like that could be an issue for him, especially with the leverage that he plays with. Very high pad level, can be very
Mhm.
stiff around the apex, doesn't have flexible hips. And then at the same time, he tested very well, but I don't think he gets that elite first step out of his stance as often as I would like from him. So, there's a few limitations that kind of concern me. I still think he can be a consistent, 8 to 10 sack guy, but does he have that blue chip upside that I'm looking for with the number 1 overall pick? To me, he doesn't. Trayvon Walker does. Now, the caveat here is that I think the floor with Trayvon Walker is so much lower. You look at what he does right now, and I think there is an avenue for you to use him the right way in year one, kind of using him how Georgia did. Just move him all across the line, let him use that straight line power and disrupt. But if you're looking for him to be a pure edge rusher, there's a lot of room for refinement there. He was largely reliant on those 2-hand extensions, really just channeling that power forward with those 2-hand extensions. Doesn't stack counters very often. He doesn't show a lot of bend around the edge. I think he's shown it like in flashes, but in all my tape watching, there's only one instance I found of using ankle flexion and accelerating around the edge. So he just simply doesn't do it very often. I feel like some of it is because he wasn't asked to, but it's a very, very big projection to suggest that he might be able to do it consistently at the next level. So a lot of questions with him, a lot of room for refinement. But at the same time, 6'5", 271, 35-inch arms, ran a 4.51. I mean, this guy is explosive. He is extremely powerful, one of the most powerful edge rushers that I've seen. So the physical tools are all there. And if you can develop them, then you do have a, potentially, historic talent athletically. A lot of room to go, with development. But I do think, if I'm picking number 1 overall, I want to swing for the fences. I don't want to get a guy who might be capped out. So that's why I prefer Walker. I don't like either. I don't love either of them at number 1 overall, but if I had to pick one, I'm going with the upside.
Yeah, to me, historically, both of those guys seem more like they'd be in the 5 to 15 range in a
Yeah.
lot of draft classes. Um, I do prefer Aiden Hutchinson. Just you look at his ability to rush the passer and his ability to set the edge. I know we have the length questions, but I do think you see some incredibly athletic plays on tape from him that I don't think he really gets credit for. I do think there's upside with him. Obviously, the gap from where he is to where he can be is a lot smaller than the gap from where Trayvon Walker is to what he could eventually become. And you have to rely on your coaching to get him there, right? But it seems to me like it probably is going to be one of those 2 picks. But according to Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson last Friday, they said there is 4 guys that they've narrowed it down to. I don't know if that's posturing. I don't know if they're trying to drum up interest, but if it is the 4 guys, I would assume the other 2 are probably Ikem Ekwonu and Evan Neal, uh, just based on Doug Peterson's affinity for offensive tackles. You've seen both of them have pre-draft visits. What do you see from Neal and Ekwonu, and how would you kind of uh, decipher those 2 guys if they were picking an offensive tackle?
Yeah, so those 2 definitely feels like they're the top 2 guys. You look at what the conversation is kind of revolving around. It's kind of Neal at the top, Ekwonu right behind him. And we've seen some mock drafts too where Ekwonu does go number 1 overall. So they're a lot closer. Charles Cross, usually, kind of viewed as the 3rd guy, but right now it looks like we got Neal and Ekwonu kind of on an island up there. So how do they compare? Well, first off, I think Neal is my OT1 first off, and I also think he's the one that I
Same
would
here.
prefer. Yeah, exactly.
I'm with you.
I'm a big fan of what he has to offer, and I'll get into that. But I also think just from a fit perspective too, if you're the Jaguars, you've got Cam Robinson on the left side. I know Tony Pauline, recently reported that maybe they're trying to extend him. So it's an interesting situation having him there. Again, they haven't extended him yet, so we don't know what's going to happen. But either way, if you need a guy to play left or right tackle, Evan Neal has starting experience at both spots. So right away, we've seen young tackles in the past play left in college and then try to transfer them to the right side in the NFL. It can be a bit of a learning curve. So, having that experience, that stability right there, is a big boost to me in my eyes if I'm picking Neal. But at the same time, you look at the tape. I mean, this guy is, 6'7", around 350. I mean, this guy's massive and also so lean and so well built for that size. It's absurd. He's a very good athlete. He gets out pretty quickly with that kick. Covers a lot of ground with it. Very athletic, matching guys around laterally. But the thing that was really impressive for me is the footwork. I mean, he has almost no wasted motion. He gets so much depth on that kick. Very smooth, very composed, matching guys around the edge, and very efficient with his timing too. He waits until edge rushers get in his wheelhouse, and then he times those punches. He's not overzealous. He's not reckless with it. Very, very calculated and methodical with how he protects the edge. And then you look at him and run as a run blocker too. The pad level can be a little bit high at times, but I do think he has pretty good knee bend for his size, can shoot into blocks, and then has the straight line power and athleticism to move guys in space. So I love Evan Neal. I think he's easily the top tackle in the class for that reason. I still graded Ekwonu very high, and I think Ekwonu, a little bit shorter, so has a little bit better pad level. He can still have
Mhm.
issues with that leverage at times too, but especially in run blocking reps. I mean, this guy is a mauler as a run blocker. I mean, he gets out in space. He's like an apex predator out there. He's got that length. He's got that closing speed. He can maul guys and bury them in the dirt. The pass protection did take a step up in 2021 as well. I thought in 2020 he was really reckless. He's a little inconsistent with the hand placement, a lot of times, and sometimes he kind of get worked off balance. I thought he was a lot better in 2021. Still areas to improve. The footwork could still be a little uncoordinated. Sometimes it gets worked off balance by guys, but there is, it's an upward trajectory, which you like to see if you're investing in a guy, right away. That said, if I'm the Jaguars, if I need someone to start right away and be a high level pass protector, I think Evan Neal is my guy. He's got that left right versatility. So I would prefer Evan Neal. I like both guys, but especially for the Jaguars and a lot of teams picking in that top 10 need right tackles. I mean, you look at the Giants too with Andrew Thomas, the Texans, Larry Tunsil. Of course, we don't really know if he's going to stay there for the long term, but a lot of these teams need a right tackle. And if we're talking about those guys at the top, which one can play right tackle right away? It's Evan Neal and no one else really. So that separates him. And then at the same time, he's a phenomenal talent.
Yeah, I Evan Neal's my number one prospect in this class. He has been for quite some time. There's just very few holes to poke in his game, and I think the one thing you look at is the balance, and to me, that has improved
Yeah.
over the course of his time in college, and it's an issue that pops up later in plays, like, usually he's already dominated someone before the balance issues pop up, like, it's when he's working to the second level. The one question I have there is, does Ike Ekwonu make more sense in a wide zone rushing attack, potentially than a Evan Neal with his ability to get out and move and just bury linebackers and defensive backs?
That could be a deciding factor for sure. And I think you
Mhm.
look at, the athleticism in space. Like I do think Evan Neal has good athleticism in space, but Ike Ekwonu is a little more natural, like you said, getting out in space and kind of chasing guys downfield and stacking blocks at the second level. So I could see that for sure. I could see that, a lot of factors to take in. You look at that, you look at the right tackle versatility, you look at, if you need an immediate starter pass protection wise, a lot of factors to take in. But that is one that I could see, especially if you're trying to use that wide zone. We know they got Travis Etienne coming back, got James Robinson. They're trying to dictate the game on the ground, and help out Trevor Lawrence. Then maybe that's something that kind of factors in as well. And then with Ekwonu as well, I mean, you have the upside for sure. You have the upside for him to potentially become, on Evan Neal's level and maybe even surpass him at the next level. They're both phenomenal talents, but again, the gap is pretty small. And in the eyes of the teams, if you think you can keep coaching him up, he does have the athleticism. He does have the 34-inch arms, the power, the tenacity. It's all there. So it just depends on, what you want to project him to be. And if he's a better fit for what you're trying to do, then I could definitely see that.
Would you say, that Ike Ekwonu is closer to being an effective player in the passing game than Trayvon Walker is? I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, it's different positions, but the NFL is such a passing league now. Do you think Ekwonu is closer to being effective in that regard than
I,
Trayvon Walker is on the other side of the ball?
I do think he is a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Again, positionally not one to one, but if I had to compare them with Aquanu, we have seen flashes of good hand usage. That snap and trap, he can do that, or snatch and trap, he can do that. He's got the violent hands for sure. It's just a matter of refining it. As with Trayvon Walker, you're really kind of bare. The cupboard is pretty bare there. Aside from the two-hand extensions, doesn't have a lot of moves in his arsenal, and he gets moved around a lot. It's kind of that mix and match player. So if you want him to be more in the NFL level, you're going to need a lot of work to do. So I think with Ekwonu, we've at least seen the flashes of targeted hand usage, and we saw him trending up in 2021, which again, if you're trying to invest in these guys, you want to buy low, right? So I think buying where he is right now, where he's still trending up and still kind of taking on the upward trajectory, very promising side for that development. As with, Trayvon Walker, still quite haven't seen that upward trajectory. He wasn't even very productive as a pass rusher. Really, you're just
Yeah.
banking on the physical tools. And at this point, it's a big bet to make if you're taking a number one overall.
Yeah. I agree with you 100% on that. So, if you had to decide today, who's the better pass rusher in 2 years, Aiden Hutchinson or Trayvon Walker?
Man, that's a tough one, man. But I
Or you can
think
do the 3-year projection if you want to as well.
Aiden Hutchinson, I would lean Aiden Hutchinson just because, while I do, there are things that concern me like the high pad level, the stiffness, right? He is so much more he's so much farther along as a pass rusher than Trayvon Walker. It's a big gap. It's a big gulch to traverse if you're if you're or golf. Golf is the word I was looking for. It's a big gulf to traverse if you're Trayvon Walker, who's really just kind of at the base, at the very bottom of it. A lot of potential there for sure, but I think Aiden Hutchinson, his floor is already pretty high there. So looking at where he is right now, I think Trayvon Walker can certainly improve in 2 years. But to say that he'll be the better pass rusher than Aiden Hutchinson, he would have to improve a ton. A little
Yeah.
more than I expect from him. So I think while I would bank on the tools sooner, Aiden Hutchinson, if you're looking for that dependable player who's going to have a high floor and going to be competitive right away, then he's that guy. There are some aspects that maybe dilute his ceiling just a little bit more than you'd expect from his athletic testing. I do think that, right now he's definitely a much higher level player. And I don't think that gap is going to close in 2 years.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. But I will say I don't think Trayvon Walker, I don't think his floor is like a bust. I think he's going to
No.
be a good, at the very least, run defender that you can use in multiple different spots. But again, it's about getting that pass rush upside that we have yet to see. So 33. The Jaguars also hold the top pick in the second round. It's a really fascinating position to be in. They had it last year as well, but you have a night to kind of digest everything that happens on day one. Then you control the top of day two, and you have potential nice trade piece because obviously no one seems to be coming up for number one, but 33 could be interesting. I personally don't think the Jaguars should be looking to trade down at this point because they already have 12 draft picks. Do you think having that much draft capital is or using that much draft capital, would you draft 12 players in a given draft, or would you try to use some of that capital to move up?
Honestly, man, I mean, you should see me play Madden. I trade all the veterans for draft picks. So like I try and go to the draft with 20 picks. So like if you have
Okay.
12 right here, like yeah, my official stance is, and especially for the Jaguars, who still have a lot of holes to fill, and I feel like that this class, the strength of this class is the depth, right? So I would probably stay put. If you get a really good offer, trade back, or maybe if there's a player that you rate very highly, especially in the back end of round one, like there might be a guy that can really fill a need for you, like maybe one of the safeties, right? I would maybe go up there for them because again, you have the 33rd pick. It's not going to take a ton to move up to like maybe 26 or 27, right? Depending on where you want to go. So if you want to be aggressive, if there's a player that you really like and rate very highly, then I would be down for that. It just depends on the opportunity cost of it all. What are you
Right.
giving up? So, and that's different for every situation. I could see that, but at the same time, at 33, I feel like you're in a really good spot. Every year we see first round prospects slip to that spot. So if you're the Jaguars, you have a very good opportunity for someone that you really like to fall into your lap too. So you got to play the board. You got to play it situational by situation. But I could definitely see, being flexible, being, open to other options and perspectives at that point. If there's a guy you really like and you think that he's going to go before you're picked, then trade up for him. But if you think that there's like 4 or 5 guys that you like, and maybe 3 of them go, and maybe one is guaranteed to be there at 33, then stand put, get your guy, and keep your capital. I think you got to play by ear, but there's a lot of options for sure. Like you said, the flexibility is really the key aspect there.
Yeah, and the guy you have fallen to them at 33 here would be a bit of a surprise for me. Uh, Devonta Wyatt, another Georgia defensive lineman. I personally value him a little bit higher than Trayvon Walker, so landing him at 33, I think that'd be incredible. A lot of Jaguars fans are talking about wide receiver at 33. You have Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, Christian Watson, Sky Moore, all on the board here. Um, the Jaguars have been linked to Kwai Walker at 33 a lot. So kind of just break down. Obviously, Devonta Wyatt, I think, is just too much of a value to pass on there. Is that your take on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think, the value is very good. I have him graded as, he's kind of in that range for me. He's kind of in that, 25, 35 range for me. The size is, he's a little bit undersized, but I don't factor that in too heavily for defensive tackles because especially, what you're drafting going to be, which is that 3 tech who gets those one-on-one opportunities. You don't need to be huge to fulfill your role there. And you look at what he brings on the field. I mean, the dude is explosive. The lateral agility is off the charts. I mean, right away, right off the snap, he can stunt those gaps and generate displacement. Very violent hands. He's shown that he can use those rips, those arm overs. Pretty good arsenal right now. I think the biggest things with him is, the 24 years of age, and, he does have an off-field arrest on his record, but that's been a while ago. Teams are going to do their homework on that and figure out if they want him in their locker room. At this point, I do think, maybe those push him out of round one, but once he gets there, he's too high level of a player to, let fall any farther. And especially for the Jaguars, you got Davon Hamilton at the nose, put Devonta Wyatt at 3-tech and just let him rush one-on-one and let him be that guy, that catalyst on the interior for you. I really love the fit. I think with those hybrid fronts can be a very strong player. And, I just think the athletic upside is too much to let fall. Now, obviously, you could go a number of different routes. It just depends on what's on the board. Like you said, a lot of wide receivers I tried to see, because obviously I do think the depth is a little bit better at wide receiver than defensive tackle in this class. So I was kind of hoping, maybe I'll get Devonta Wyatt right now and then see what's there at wide receiver at 65, or maybe
And that's exactly what you did here.
Exactly. So, and then safety as well. Like if Lewis Cine is there, I'm running to the podium. I love
I think
Lewis
they
Cine.
would too.
Yes, I would consider trading up for him, honestly, because I'm such a big fan of him. But if a safety is there, you take him. But with Devonta Wyatt, I just played the value. It feels a need, and if you're a very talented player, and you can probably get something at other positions later on.
Yeah, and it's pass rush juice as well. I know a lot of people look at a defensive tackle, they don't really think pass rush, but that's what Devonta Wyatt is for you. Like you said, that 3-tech,
Yeah.
I think he can hold up to it, the point of attack in the run game if you play him inside. He's not just a pass rusher. So I think that would be a home run of a pick. But
He has some really impressive plays where he uses that lateral agility to kind of stunt gaps and run defense too, like on the
yeah,
move, like piercing through, knifing through. So I love that about his game. And then pass rushing, edge rushers get all the hype, but the quickest path to the quarterback, straight line. So on the
hmm
interior, I think it's a cohesive, symbiotic relationship. You need both, but having that can really help, free up guys like Josh Allen and Chase On as well. So I think it could really help that defensive line.
All right, so we have a couple third round picks here. 65, they go get Justin Ross, Trevor's old buddy from Clemson, and then at 70, Daniel Falele, the offensive tackle, played right tackle over in Minnesota. He's a really interesting story, but just talk about these two picks. Do you personally value Justin Ross this high at 65?
So he's a day two guy for me. I really like the player for sure. And I do think there's some questions, about his recent tape. But I look at, he was battling a foot injury for a lot of this past season, and he still put
hmm
on pretty quality tape, I thought. I think not an elite athlete. He's never going to be an elite athlete. He tested, I think he ran like in the 4.6s or something. So doesn't have that deep speed. And that shows up on tape. And didn't test very well with explosiveness either. But I do think he shows more burst on tape, that functional burst. You always want to kind of go back and reference that. And to me, I was just very impressed being a 6'4", 205 receiver, very good route runner from what I saw. I think this guy has very good short area agility for his size, good foot speed. He's, eating up those stems, those cushions for the DBs and kind of breaking pretty fast. He's got that good hip sync, that stopping ability, and he's pretty methodical too. He can use those head fakes, right? So, I really love the route running with him. I think that gives him a high floor. But when the ball comes his way as well, he's got body control. He's got good instincts. The hands can be a little bit better sometimes in contact situations. But again, I do think he has the size, and the instincts to wall off DBs and be a good target there. And then after the catch as well, he's got some agility to him. I think, you're looking at a pretty solid 3-level threat with that size. And for me too, we look at the Jaguars offseason signings. Obviously, Zay Jones. You got Christian Kirk, who signed to a massive deal. They upgraded that receiving core for sure. But at the same time, is there a guy that, can really elevate it for Trevor Lawrence? And I look at the chemistry that he and Justin Ross have. To me, that's an added element because you got all these new pieces. It might take them a little bit to, gain that chemistry with Lawrence, a young quarterback. Whereas with Justin Ross, he played a few years in college with him. So I think that chemistry element can help provide a little bit of familiarity, some comfort to Lawrence and help him along this offseason, kind of put together, be the final piece to that receiving core. So he's a day two guy for me. I definitely value him here. I think, probably in the, he might, I still got to grade some players. He might wind up in that 60, 75 range for me, but I do have him as a day two guy. He's not a day three, even with the athleticism.
Yeah.
And then especially with the chemistry and the fit kind of weighs him up for me. This is one of my favorite matches for that reason, getting Trevor Lawrence, a familiar player, especially after last year, someone who can, provide some comfort for him, can maybe help him take have a bounce back year in 2021. As for Falele, this was an interesting one for me because, again, the scheme fit to me wasn't perfect. You mentioned the wide zone. Falele to me is more of that power gap type guy, isn't great in space. But I look at what the Eagles did with Jordan Mailata, an Australian-born football player who was very, very big. I think he's a little bit more athletic than Falele, but I do think Falele, if you can get him in that weight management program in the NFL, cut down some weight, maybe he can glean more athleticism. Then you look at how he plays at right tackle. We see NFL teams sometimes where they have that left tackle who's a little bit more athletic, because that's the blind side for most quarterbacks. So they don't have the luxury of, having that tackle in their line of sight. Whereas with right tackle, sometimes you just need a big guy, a powerful guy who can get his hands on guys and lock them down. And if they get beat, then at least they're in the line of sight for the quarterback, so he can step up and escape and kind of extend the play. I think at this point, Falele, it's tough to peg down where he's going to go because again, he's such an interesting player. You look at the size. Can you glean more athleticism from his frame? With that NFL training regimen, I think it's possible. He's still got to fix that pad level. He's still got to fix the lateral mobility. But I do think at this point, we know that Peterson has worked with a bigger blocker on the bookend before. So looking at that, maybe it's enough for them, especially with that uncertainty at right tackle, adding another body in there and seeing what happens. So to me, especially with, this right tackle class after Falele and, even really after him, it really thins out. There's not a lot of options beyond that. If you're looking for a natural right tackle to factor in that equation, this class is very thin there. So at this point, if you don't take Falele, that might be it for you. You might be looking at guys that probably aren't going to factor into a starting equation or a battle anytime soon on day 3. And to me, at that position where it's still a little uncertain, that was a risk I was willing to take. Even if he's not a perfect scheme fit, just getting that guy with those tools in there.
Yeah, I know they've brought in Rasheed Walker, who obviously played left tackle at Penn State this past season. I think he's a little bit too much of a projection. I'm not sure if I see the athleticism from Rasheed Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Falele, interesting athlete, right? He's just a mountain.
Yep.
So you have to factor that in. I think that would be an interesting pick. And like you said, Doug Peterson has worked with those bigger guys before, even in a zone rushing attack. Now, Dylan Parham, he is a guy the Jaguars have shown a lot of interest in. You have him sliding to 106 here for the Jaguars, top of day 3. Talk to me a little bit about him and his fit and Doug Peterson's offense.
Yeah, so I think with him, you're getting a little bit better athlete, a guy who I think can play in those wide zone schemes. I think, after Brandon Litter retired, they still have Tyler Shatley. They've expressed confidence in Shatley. But that said, I would want to get some solid depth in there. And I think that at the very least, Dylan Parham provides you that. At the Senior Bowl, I was really impressed with his ability to, he's got really good knee bend. He's got a good base for sure. He can stay steady in that base. But at the same time, you look at the physical, makeup that he has, around 6'2", 5'8", 311 pounds, 33 1/8 arms, so arms over 33 inches. So I like guys that are a little bit shorter but have those longer arms, because when you're shorter, you have natural leverage, right? You can get under guys easier, but with longer arms, you can hit the contact point sooner. You can go man to man against longer defensive tackles. So always good to see that. Good core strength for sure from Dylan Parham, and I know he tested very well too. He had a 4.93, 26.5-inch vert, 8.83 RAS, or 8.84 RAS. So the tools are there for sure. And I think the guard center flexibility, he has experience with both, gives him some utility as a depth guy in round 4. And then, eventually can go on to be a starter. I think he has the tools for that too. So at this point, just that offensive line, getting insurance and good tools to potentially become a starter is kind of what I was banking on here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people wouldn't be surprised if he comes off to the board to the Jaguars in the 3rd round.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got, obviously the Jaguars have a ton of picks on day 3. Is there anybody, you've got Tariq Carpenter, Kyler McMichael, Jack Sanborn, an interesting name who I've seen connected, Alec Lindstrom as well. I know they were at that Boston College Pro Day. Jesse Luketa, a Senior Bowl standout, kind of shifted his role at Penn State in 2021, and then Leonard Johnson and Dontario Drummond from Ole Miss. Is there a day 3 pick there that kind of piqued your interest the most out of all those guys?
It's a tough one for sure. I mean, Drummond that late is interesting because he's around 6 foot, I think 215. He's got a really good frame density, right? So I think getting that in there could be a decent add late. Again, I love to take late round swings on wide receivers, right? Just get more depth in that position. It's never a bad thing. Tariq Carpenter is really interesting. I know he's been generating a lot of interest late. I think he's around 6'3". He's a bigger dude for sure. He played safety, but he tested very well athletically, and that explosiveness
Yeah.
shows up on tape. I could see teams maybe looking at him as that safety linebacker hybrid, right? You can move him around a little bit in the defense. Still got some development to undergo, but can be a very good special teamer early on too. So I look at that. Maybe someone banks on the upside early day 3. I do like Lucetta that late. That was an issue where, if he's going to go that late, it's at that point where I think he would be a very good value deal. Play him as the on-ball Sam who can rush the passer and kind of stay close to the line. I love the physicality, the tenacity that he plays with in that range. And at the Senior Bowl, he showed good speed to power. So I think he can,
Yeah.
even though he's a little bit smaller, can match up with guys and kind of be a threat there. So, overall, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think Alec Lindstrom gives you more depth. Again, that was more of a value deal. Even after getting Parham, some more interior depth is never a bad thing. And I think getting him in that rotation at that point, if you're picking anywhere else, not a lot to lose, not a huge opportunity cost with that round 6 pick. So it's just one of those things where, playing the value of the board. But overall, I think with the Jaguars, the biggest thing, those day 3 picks are important, but getting that first overall pick right, getting that 33rd overall pick right, using it however you can, and then getting that 65th overall pick too, because round 3 is another area we've seen very good players fall to that range. So it's all about playing the board, see what happens, and if you need to move around a little bit, do that, but be flexible, be open to, moving around and just try and get the most out of those first few rounds. I do think there's a lot of depth in this class to take advantage of in day 3, but those early round picks, there's no replacement for them.
Yeah. I know I've kept you on here a little bit longer, but one final question. If the Jaguars, who are connected to Kwai Walker at 33, if that's the pick they make, do you value him in that range? Do you think that's a reach? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
So I do really like the upside with Kwai Walker. And I think, it all goes back to the tape, 6'4", 240, very explosive athlete, very twitchy in those short ranges. I love the athlete and how he's put together. And I do think that he flashes instincts, especially in the running game, can match laterally very well, can come downhill and tackle. In coverage, he's definitely more of a projection right now. He's not supernatural, getting back and managing space. Can let guys sneak behind him sometimes. The blind spot awareness can improve. But I think the traits are enough to bank on there. Maybe that'll be a little bit early for me, but I know I have the physical traits graded very highly, and I do think that there's enough processing capacity where he can improve. He's not like the eyes are a liability for him. He's very good matching plays and tracking them. So that's a place where I would be comfortable taking him. Again, if there's 2 Georgia defenders on the board, if Lewis Cine is on the board with them, it's not a discussion for me. You take Lewis Cine, but it depends on who's there. I think if Walker is one of the best options there, if the board didn't play very well at other positions, then I'd be down. Get him in that linebacker room. I think he has a lot of upside, and at his max projection can be a very versatile, dynamic defender for your unit. And then, on top, the issue is, like Devonta Wyatt. If you pick Kwai Walker, you're probably not getting Devonta Wyatt there. So try and get a defensive tackle later on too, because you want to have a strong defensive front that the linebackers can play off of. But, just pure upside, pure, potential, what he has, what he brings, what he has to offer. I really love it. And if you can get the most out of him, then you're getting a very good player.
Awesome. Well, Ian, I really appreciate your time here today. I know the Jaguars fans are thrilled to kind of get a national NFL draft analyst's opinions and insight on what the Jaguars could do in the 2022 NFL draft. We're 3 days away. I know everybody can follow you on Twitter at Ian_Cummings_9. We're going to get rid of some of those underscores in the coming weeks, I'm sure. But just tell people how they can follow your coverage of the NFL draft, starting on Thursday.
Yeah, so usually the Twitter is gonna be the hub for it for sure. So at _Cummings_9, make sure you follow that. But yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to add me, hit me up there. I'll be happy to answer them for you. As for PFN, really just writing, updating scouting reports a little bit more. We got a big board update coming, I think tomorrow. We've got a 2023 initial big board that we're working on
Oh
as
boy.
well. So I've got a watch list of 300 guys already, man. It's crazy, but it helps to roll into the next year. As for the draft, we're going to be grading teams in real time, live as the draft is going with each pick. So that'll be fun. And then obviously post draft, how did each team do? That'll be a big factor as well. So a lot of draft content on the way. I'm very excited for it.
I'm pumped for it as well. Again, we are 3 days away from the NFL draft. That's going to do it. Really appreciate Ian for joining us. Really appreciate everyone for tuning in. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube and check genjag.com for all the latest Jaguars news and analysis.